Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Tottenham Hotspur, the roller coaster they provide, eh? As you may have been aware from my last video, I did technically say I was off this week. And I must admit there was a part of me that kind of this morning thought, is it really worth inflicting myself? And thoughts on that performance on everyone wasn't last night bad enough. But I think, it's Tottenham Hotspur. And we can't just shy away from a poor performance. We've got to kind of discuss it, do a bit of, an inquest into it and see exactly what happened and what went wrong and how it doesn't happen again. Not that Jose Mourinho or anyone is going to listen to me, but sometimes it can be quite cathartic, can't it, to kind of pick through the bones of something and maybe have a little look at why it went wrong. And also, we've got to obviously give a little bit of context because, as I said at the start, Tottenham are a bit of a roller coaster, but in the grand scheme of this season so far, that's Tottenham's first defeat in 11 games. So we're not going to go overboard. There's no reason to start wailing. You're not going to see me crying during this video at any point. It wasn't that kind of night, and I think Spurs were quite fortunate in the fact that the performance came early in the group stages, and on paper and by logic, they should go on and still qualify from this group. That shouldn't be an issue. And perhaps it came at a time that maybe was a bit of a timely reminder of the fact that you just cannot underestimate anyone. And I think that goes for the wider, sense as well. Media, fans, everyone. Because I even saw, I think it was on Twitter, I think it was Twitter rather than Facebook, people saying, losing to a bunch of Belgian farmers. And it's just like, no, they're not. Royal Antwerp are top of the Belgian league. They're not, we're not talking about a bunch of amateur part-time. This isn't an FA Cup match or anything against some non-league side. This is a very organised team in good form. And this is the other element of it. While, of course, Tottenham should have won the game from a quality perspective, we really shouldn't get away from the fact that Antwerp played very well. They were very organised, defended superbly, and they did that classic thing of trying to hit Tottenham on the counter-attack. And to be honest, 1-0 was perhaps fortunate for Tottenham. It could have been worse. I thought Royal Antwerp played really well, and I want to get that straight out there at the start, not before we start laying into Tottenham and little things that weren't right, and that goes for the manager as well. I think a lot of credit has to go to the Belgian side. To dismiss them as farmers is ridiculous, really. They're a very well organised, prepared side that, as Mourinho I think said afterwards, played to the absolute top of their ability, and they got the result they deserved, and fair play to them. But yeah. I mean, what I should also say, and I've said this in the past, is obviously, as I was off this week, I wasn't at either of the games. I wouldn't have been in Belgium anyway due to the isolation issues, but I wasn't at Burnley. As I always kind of add the caveat whenever I'm talking about matches I wasn't at, while I watched them both on the television, you get a decent sense of the match. For me, I always say this, it's not quite the full picture. You maybe don't see the way players interact, the runs players make off the ball that you might not see with the angles you're given. So I'll do my best with what I saw, but obviously there's not going to be a lot of kind of behind-the-scenes type things, little extra moments and stuff like that. So I apologise in advance for that, but we can still tackle the subject of Tottenham Hotspur this week. I'm not really going to go into Burnley too much because I think it is what it was. It is what it is. It was what it was. That's kind of been and gone now. Now we have to kind of move on to the next result. Just kind of brief thoughts on that. I thought it was all about the result that day. A very different kind of 1-0. Tottenham struggling to threaten too much, but they fought. They battled away, and I thought that was really important. And even the goal was slightly scruffy, but it continued the Kane-Son show. But in terms of the Premier League, it really did the job in a tough place. And as Mourinho said before the match, Burnley will not be a team in relegation trouble come the end of the season. I agree with that. I think they're going to get better and better and tougher to play. And I think going there and getting a 1-0 result could be quite important come the end of the season for Tottenham. But yeah, we move on. It's about last night. And obviously Brighton at the weekend. So last night, made 9 changes. Normally makes, I think he made 8 for the last round, and that seems to be a kind of a general figure. He likes to, make quite a few changes. I'm really not one of these that buys into the whole. If you change a team up too much, it's not good enough. It's disjointed. Blah blah blah. Because I kind of feel that when that team is playing almost every other match, that shouldn't be the case. They played in the first game and they played reasonably well. They kind of got a sense a lot of these players are playing together. Obviously, slight changes in a couple of personnel, but players of this quality training every single day at Hotspur Way together, there shouldn't be issues with being able to link up. And Mourinho said it himself about how it's about getting the balance right in a team. That's his job as well. First half, I thought it started quite brightly. I thought even players like Steven Bergwijn, I thought early on actually looked like he was really going to make a difference. I thought Carlos Vinicius played as well as, obviously without the final touch. I did think his hold-up play was very good, brought other players into play. And I could kind of see where it was going. They just looked ropey at the back. And obviously, having that midfield pivot of Winks and Celso is, of course, not going to be as defensively strong as, say, Højbjerg and Sissoko or a midfield three. But I've got to be honest. I felt they missed Tanguy Ndombele. And I think that's a big credit to Tanguy himself. I think that shows the circle he's come round. I do think they missed his incisive play, his ability to hold the ball. There were too many times when a lot of the players, including Dele, but we'll come to him in a minute, I think a lot of the players just wasted possession really needlessly. There was like a kind of an impatience. I don't know whether they'd been warned. Maybe they were going to come off at half time. I don't know, but certainly a lot of their play, it built up, and then just bang. The ball was just kind of thrown away needlessly. And I think with Tanguy, you don't get that. With Ndombele, he uses the ball very well. And I think he's a player in form, and he's done very well. And I really felt they missed him. There was a strange comment about him. Mourinho said pre-game he didn't travel with Dyer. Dyer was because of the previous injury and just letting him rest up after coming back to action. With Ndombele, he said he felt it. That was one of those where it perhaps needed a little bit of extra clarification. You couldn't really tell whether he meant he felt a little injury or just felt a bit knackered. But hopefully there's no indication that he's not going to be available for the weekend. But I kind of felt Tottenham missed him just doing what he does. Which, like I say, is such a great show of how important he's become for the team. But I felt Lo Celso's role really was to do that. But for Ndombele, he gets to do that, or he has been, in a midfield three. So having Sissoko and Højbjerg behind you gives you that little bit of license to kind of do what you do as Tanguy Ndombele. Lo Celso didn't really have that. Obviously, he was playing more of a two with Winks, with Ali kind of dropping back and playing a bit of a box-to-box role. But mostly, it was Lo Celso alongside Winks. So Lo Celso didn't really have the luxury of maybe just opening up the game slightly. And if I'm going to be ultra critical of Mourinho, I kind of felt 4 substitutions at half-time was a little bit showy and overkill. I thought it was harsh on some of the players. I thought Vinicius in particular, I don't think he'd been doing much wrong. I think just he was laying it off to players around him who were struggling to then do anything with the ball. And I think that was no reflection on him, really. I thought he battled really well, provided a focal point for the team, and I'd like to have seen him remain on the pitch playing alongside likes of Son and Lucas if you're bringing him on as well. I did feel that, I think replacing him with Son was incredibly harsh. And like I say, with Lo Celso, if you're going to bring Højbjerg on, I probably would have brought on Højbjerg alongside Winks and then said to Lo Celso, right now you push up and do what you can do in an Ndombele role. And I just kind of felt, we know what Mourinho's like. He likes to make a big statement, and that's clearly what he did. The game afterwards very much became about those 4 substitutions and obviously a 5th before the hour mark. And I just don't really think it was entirely necessary. I get the saying to the players, that isn't good enough, we need to change this up. You've let me down, or whatever statement he was trying to make. But Yeah, I just don't, especially those two. For me, Vinicius and Lo Celso. I think you can argue Bergwijn, after a really bright start, faltered a bit and really kind of lost his impact. Dele had a tough game. I must admit, I was really happy to see him in the starting lineup. When I saw his name on there, and I kind of thought, great, now it's an opportunity. Just do what you can do, Dele Alli. Because, you are a quality player, and it's just a case of getting your rhythm, getting your chances. He put the effort in. I don't think it was a lack of effort. It was just a real lack of quality. I think I read the stats. He gave the ball away 11 times in 45 minutes. You could argue that many was trying stuff, but when you really looked at the moments of play, he was getting into good positions, players either side available for the pass, and he's just failing to give it to them. Or likewise, there would be opportunities where maybe in the past a confident Dele Alli would have taken a shot. And it was such a shame, and I just thought, taking him off at half time, it was such a kind of, I don't know, school teacher kind of thing to do to a pupil, who maybe has been disappointing you. It was such a, well, there you go. I gave you a shot and you mucked it up. And it's kind of, in a game where, like I say, I don't think the result was the be-all and end-all. Would it have been the worst thing to give him another 10, 15 minutes just to respond to whatever half-time rollicking the players got, no doubt? Yeah, I do feel that, Mourinho's done a lot of good things at Tottenham, but I do feel sometimes in moments like that, it's a little bit about Mourinho more than the players. And, and he said after the game, his comments, I won't make the same mistake again, just kind of in making so many changes at the start of the starting lineup. And, and you won't ask in future why I don't play certain players. That's a clear indication to probably Dele. And maybe some others as well, like Bergwijn and things like that. But I think that's massively contradictory, really, to what he's been saying about the strength of his squad. This is the whole point. I'm sure you all did. I certainly did. I looked at that team that put out last night, the starting 11. I thought, that is a bloody strong team. I think even on BT Sport, Glenn Hoddle said that's a team that could win a domestic trophy on its own. And you looked at the bench, and it's ridiculous. And I think Mourinho's been praising that quality, saying about his options, and then I think after the match to say, well, I won't make the same mistake in picking them again, it just really kind of felt a bit contradictory, a bit reactive, and that's kind of something I always felt Mourinho isn't. He's quite, I think he's been quite good in whatever the result, whatever, he will look at things within that performance and say, well, okay, well, they kind of did what I wanted, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't a massive fan of that. I did feel that, he's asking players, he's saying after the game he wants players to come in straight away and hit the ground running, prove why they should be in the team. But then you've kind of got the other side of it. If they're not playing, with Dele at the moment is not the Dele Alli we knew, the one who broke records, the one who reached goal targets that the likes of Lampard, Scholes, Gerrard didn't even dream of getting towards by the age of 24. But he's not that Dele out right now. He's got confidence issues, clearly doesn't feel that he's believed in. Is taking him off after 45 minutes going to help that? Of course not. Yes, and by everything Mourinho's saying, he's been training hard, training well, not responding great to not being left out, but that's a good thing, in his eyes as well, in terms of, maybe saying, or just not answering back. But you know what I mean. No player should be happy to be left out of a team. But so he's kind of doing the right things off the pitch, but just on the pitch, it just didn't happen for him. And whatever, Ludogorets next week, perhaps, if again, this is the issue. If Mourinho's saying he's not going to give players that chance, they're not going to get that chance to get fit, sharp, and do what he wants them to do. It's such a vicious circle. Not a Vinicius circle, but a vicious circle. But yeah, as I said, if you were going to make two subs, if I was going to be brutally honest, then perhaps yes, Bergwijn and Alli. Perhaps. I still think it was particularly harsh on Alli in terms of if you're expecting him to improve. But I kind of get it from being a tough manager point of view. Lo Celso and Vinicius, less so. But then obviously we look at it with hindsight, and you could say Spurs' performance was a bit better in the second half. They still could have conceded goals. Did they really threaten the goalkeeper? Probably not. So in hindsight, you could look at it and say it was a mentality thing as well. It maybe perhaps wasn't so much about the personnel. Son came on, and Son's been fantastic. Son didn't, he made his decision making wasn't great on the night. Same with Eric Lamela. Harry Kane came on, struggled, didn't really see much of the ball at all. Lucas did what Lucas does, which is kind of bluster around, causing a threat, but perhaps without the actual bite to back up the bark. And Højbjerg kind of did what he was meant to do in the midfield role. We can't really perhaps blame him, but certainly, Lucas, Lamela, Son, Kane coming on against a team that, as I say, on paper should be struggling. I think the fact that they actually struggled themselves not only showed the issue with the overall team mentality last night, but also points towards the quality that Antwerp showed on the night, and fair play to them for that as well. We haven't spoken about Bale. Gareth Bale is still very much a player coming, but you can see he's still so rusty in moments. He's still not just kind of opening his legs and up and, really sprinting and going at stuff. Again, there's some nice little touches. More defensive work. I felt he tracked back more this time, which shows, a growing fitness. But, yeah, Vinicius or Celso could probably point to Bale and say, did we really deserve to come off if he was able to stay on? And I think that would probably be a fair comment. But, again, it's about getting him minutes. A luxury that perhaps he's afforded, and maybe someone like Dele isn't. It will serve Tottenham in the long term. And we know there's no kind of shying away from it. We know that Bale, once fit, will be a starting 11 player. That's the aim. That's the point. That's what's meant to happen. And they're trying to get him there, so I understand that. But when you have the quality, let's just look at those names who were on the pitch at some point last night. Vinicius, Bergwijn, Alli, Lo Celso, Son, Lamela, Lucas, Kane, Bale. Not one of them, they could barely muster a shot at goal between them. And that says everything about, for me, the overall mentality of the players, I think, underestimating what they were going to come up against, and a lack of ideas. So that was meant to be cathartic. That was meant to be me kind of understanding kind of what went wrong. And like I say, I think the most important thing is if it acts as a wake-up call. Certainly for the attackers. The attackers have been fantastic this season. I don't want to have one game and start, running them down. I think that's very much what it was. The game in isolation, which is probably the wrong word to use right now, but you know what I mean. They've been creating lots of chances and goals, and perhaps just this week with Burnley in that match, I think you can't go to Turf Moor, battle away to get a rare shot on target and score from it, and then not feel that you have to do the same away in Belgium. That for me was a little bit naive, and it's all part of the learning process. And Mourinho, Mourinho put an Instagram post up. His Instagram has become really a little bit showboaty kind of thing. A bit like pre-match, it was him watching a movie on the plane. Post-match, it's him on the coach looking really annoyed. And I'm really angry. I hope the other players are as angry as me. Back to training tomorrow morning, 11:30 a.m. or whatever it was. And I don't know about you, but I always think, who's taking that photo of him? He sat on that coach looking all annoyed with his mask on. And he obviously said to someone, take a photo of me and write this. It's funny the way social media works. But I did feel, I think in one of the interviews, I don't know if it was an interview or a press conference, he accepted the blame for choosing the team, but then kind of in classic Mourinho style turned that into I picked them, but they've got to do it kind of thing. It was like, I won't make that mistake again. Yes, I made a mistake picking him and him and him and him. So it kind of wasn't it's my fault. It was my fault for believing in you because you're rubbish. Perhaps not to that degree, but you know what I mean. I've got to talk about defence. Where do we start? So, I felt people against Burnley, Davies and Doherty were slightly criticised, I felt, because of the lack of attacking endeavour and a couple of little mistakes like Davies made. But ultimately, they fought hard and they got a clean sheet. And at the end of the day, that's the end goal for the defence. Last night, I think if you're gonna, I think they all equally, maybe for me one slightly gets away with it, but I do think they all have to be looked at in the same harsh light. I thought Reguilón probably, and don't get me wrong, I think Reguilón's fantastic. He's a brilliant player. I didn't think last night was his best game so far. Possibly the weakest he's had in both sense. Attacking wise, probably wasn't up to too much. Defensive wise, they got by him a few times. Again, part of the learning process. I thought Aurier looked shaky. I felt Antwerp kind of targeted that side quite a bit. I thought Aurier looked a little bit, he was out of position a few times. And this is why when I said as one player I felt probably didn't deserve too much criticism, but he'll get it anyway because of who he is. I felt Davinson Sanchez spent a lot of the game covering either behind Aurier trying to kind of mop up there or getting across because Ben Davies had a real mixed game. Obviously, the mistake for the goal was daft, dithering in possession. I have no idea what he was doing, and gave that ball away and let them run on to score. He made a couple of other kind of silly positional mistakes, but then on the other hand, made a couple of great blocks as well. With Sanchez, I just felt he was kind of caught in between, like, who do I cover, and that kind of was shown in the goal. Yes, of course, in hindsight, looking at, he could have tried to cut out. It's one of those you really can't win situations. Do you try and cut out the pass across to the other player, or do you try and cut out the shot? Because if you try and cut out the pass, the player just goes on and has a shot at goal anyway. It really is a no-win situation. So I thought that was probably a bit harsh on him. But he'll get criticised because we know with Davinson Sanchez, he often has one silly mistake in a game. And unfortunately, that defines him more so than the rest of the performances, which are often quite good. And like I say, last night, I didn't think he was great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he had a really good performance, but I did feel that a lot of the time he was covering for others. And I felt that reflected on his performance and caused some of the issues that probably people solely looking at him because they don't rate him or whatever. Maybe they're just looking at him, again, I use that word, isolation, rather than looking at the bigger picture of what he was trying to cover for. So yeah, defensive-wise, wasn't great. I must admit, I was a bit surprised Hugo Lloris played. I didn't really understand the point of that, especially as Joe Hart had kept Spurs' first clean sheet of the season, and they're both organisers. Joe Hart is just a non-stop, perpetual motion mouth, more so than Lloris. But I don't think having Hart in there, I don't know, maybe that was Mourinho's attempt to say, look, let's have our leader in there to show we're not underestimating this team. But yeah, I just didn't really feel there was too much need for it to be Lloris. Ultimately, it probably didn't matter. But again, it's another case of a player not getting minutes maybe that he'd hoped for. And then if you have to play Hart in a big match because Lloris is injured, maybe then he's not as match sharp. But yeah, it's probably it's probably not the biggest deal in the world when in the grand scheme of the performance, but I just thought that was an interesting one as well. But yeah, that back four, it didn't work. I think slating Davies after it as a centre-back would be a bit daft, having played so well in the position in the previous game, in the first group stage match. So it's a tough one with Davies. I don't want to go overboard in either direction because I think that pretty much sums up Ben Davies. I think he's a solid player. He makes the odd silly mistake. Ultimately, he's now probably become a squad player, but I think there will be lots of matches he will play in, whether that be at left back, battling to get results like they did at Burnley. I think coming into the middle, they've got to get Tanganga fit. Tanganga's a big miss. He's a young player that has so much potential. He's on his way back, but he's just had a really bad period of injuries right now, and it's really kind of stunted his progress. And obviously we have Joe Rodon, who made his debut in those last few moments against Burnley. He can't play in Europe, which is such a shame because nights like last night, he'd have played. And you wonder how much that would have helped his adaptation to the team, and he then would have got more minutes going forward. You'd imagine he'll play against Stoke in the Carabao Cup, which I think, did I see that's been called the Papa John's Cup? we all like a pizza, but that's a very interesting name. I think that was what I saw anyway. Like I say, I've been off, so I've kind of been dipping in and out of news. But anyway, let's not head off into pizza territory. But yeah, that defence, he just needs to find the best partnership there. I think we certainly know that Reguilon is going to be the first choice left back. I think Doherty and Aurier are going to have a little battle together, which should spur them on. Didn't look like it last night or perhaps Monday, but they have been, putting in decent performances before that. And it's just those central defensive roles that now need to be sorted out. Alderweireld was unusual, perhaps not to play, having come back and done all the media as well. Not to start him was an interesting one. He will look at last night and perhaps think that it'll be him and Dyer back in there, especially having kept the clean sheet against Burnley as well. So you'd think those two will start against Brighton. And then, like I say, Tanganga and Rodon are ones for the future. But if they can get minutes anywhere, then I still think there's a chance for one of them to stamp their claim on their centre-back spot, because I don't think anyone's really done enough to say I'm that first choice starting centre-back. And that includes, like I say, Dyer and Alderweireld. I don't think Mourinho is 100% convinced on any one of his centre-backs right now. So they're up for grabs. And that's the trouble, isn't it? When you've kind of got that slightly weaker foundation with the strength ahead of it, it does make you vulnerable. It really does. So, looking forward, we've looked back enough. Brighton at the weekend on Sunday. Spurs have got this little run of matches now where they kind of need to get back to what they were doing, keep that momentum going, because you've got Brighton at home, Ludogorets away, and West Brom away before the second international break, which is madness, but I won't go there. So Tottenham have to kind of get some points flowing from those three matches, get their momentum up, because if you're not aware, there's some massive games coming after the international break. Within those fixtures, Spurs will take on Manchester City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, all in almost a row of fixtures pretty much. So they can't afford to kind of be in not a bad state, but lacking confidence when they return for the international break, because they need to be at an absolute peak. Mourinho needs to sort out his defence by that point and exactly what he wants from them, and who is the kind of first choice back four, as it were. Obviously, we know Mourinho, he'll change certain players for certain matches, but they need to... I think they need to get 3 clean sheets, I'll be honest, from the next 3 games as well. Get that confidence going, get the belief in the team. And this is the trouble, he'll be back to that old thing. Do I sacrifice an attacking player to shore up the defence, but then lose the potential goals up front as well? We need to get Kane and Son back to what they were doing. It's a big run of games. I just keep looking at that November, essentially end of November heading into December, and it is huge. It could, not to be too grandiose, but it could kind of define the direction Tottenham's season's going to go in. Because if they can, get some positive results in the next 3 games, and then in those 4 matches against those massive teams, at least come out of it with a decent amount of points, then it's setting up a real push for the second half or so of the Premier League season. Come out with it in a bad way, and perhaps then you're just kind of looking like you're scrabbling around for the rest of the season just to try to get into the top 4 when perhaps you could dream of more. Like I say, I'd like to see Ndombele back in that team. I think it's great that he makes the difference now. I think that's testament to him. Really interesting quotes from him. If you saw him, he did a very rare interview. It kind of changed a little bit this week. He did a little bit for the Spurs. You might have seen him do a little message for the fans, which was very unusual. And then he did an interview, and he's funny in the way he talks. He's, like I was fortunate enough, I was one of the first, 3 of his first journos to interview him when he came to Spurs. It was done through Sissoko back then, and this was an interview in French. He's got a way about him. I can see why he butts heads with Mourinho, or has certainly in the past, because he's perhaps a little bit of a it's not my fault kind of guy as well. His quotes were really interesting. It's very much about how, no, Mourinho's words didn't bother me and all this sort of stuff. And the 2 interviews, he did another little interview with French media about 2 weeks ago. And in neither of the interviews that I saw, unless they kept any quotes back, in none of them has he actually admitted to, I needed to buck up my ideas a bit and improve my fitness and crack on as well. There's no kind of nod towards that. Everything's just kind of like, well, I'm getting a chance now, so you're seeing what I can do. I don't think it's entirely that, Tanguy. I think there's a lot more to it. I think you're a much fitter player than he was. And I think he's got a more of an adaptation. He's adapted to the Premier League and the demands on him. And he's becoming a more all-round player as well, which is important as well. But no, I just find that quite funny. I think it kind of gave a nice little insight into why, you know, the special one and the Tanguy one have perhaps clashed, because they both have that very much a belief of I'm right, I guess is the way to put it. But yeah, looking forward to seeing him back. I hope Lo Celso now isn't going to go the way of back into being a fringe kind of guy in Mourinho's thoughts, because Mourinho knows how important Lo Celso has been. And for the sake of 45 minutes, this is what worried me. Saying that big comment about I won't make the same mistakes again, about players who have been very good. You know, Bergwijn's had real flashes. We know what he can do. It's just about getting consistency. Vinicius, I really do think's adapted quite well. I'd like to see him in a Premier League game, see how he deals with the physicality as well. I did think that was incredibly harsh on him. The Celso, we know he's a battling playmaker. Play him in a 3, not as one of the 2, and I think you see the best of him. And we know what Dele can do. Dele can be wonderful. He just needs to get his confidence back. He needs to feel loved again. And he's got to do a lot of work himself. You know, I'm totally not saying that it's all coming in one direction. He has to get back. He has to get everything back himself. A lot of it is through what he does. And he'll see the benefits, but he needs minutes. So there you go. Like I say, I'm not going to go on for as long as I do in normal videos, because I don't want to kind of linger on that. I'm back as well. I'm back at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday for Brighton's game, for the game against Brighton. Hopefully we'll see a more positive result. I think they've got Lewis Dunk out, haven't they? Whether that plays some kind of part, but they're still a tough team. You know, they're set up very well. Again, Mourinho said it straight afterwards. Brighton will be better. They will be better than Antwerp, and Antwerp played very well. So no taking it for granted whatsoever, please, Tottenham. They've got to turn up. Like I say, hopefully this was a little wake-up call that they needed ahead of the game. I still can't forget the game against Brighton. Pochettino in his last few months, the one where Lloris was injured, was one of the worst Tottenham performances I've ever seen. Admittedly away, but not a repeat of that. Let's get back to the free-scoring Tottenham with a little bit more responsibility at the back, and see Tottenham putting the goals in that net, because, like I say, build up the momentum, and then you'll see what they can do after the international break. Falter a little bit, and then, you know, morale and confidence and the whole outlook starts to change a bit, but the quality is still there. The quality is there. I don't want to end on that way, because obviously the quality is there, and I still believe this Tottenham team can do good things this season. And I think if you're going to get daft, underestimating performances out of your system, get them, I suppose, out of the way in matches like that last night. It's not pretty. It's incredibly frustrating for the fans. It was a rubbish watch. 90 minutes of our lives we'll never get back ever again. Not that you get many minutes of your life back, but you know what I mean. So yeah, get back to the Tottenham and the promise, and let's see what that brings this weekend. I shall catch you later, of course. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and look after yourselves. Talk to you later. Bye.